You are a great partner, Sandra. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. For those that I haven't met yet in the room, I'm Joyce Romano. I'm the Vice President for Student Affairs at Valencia. And we have been in this journey together from day one. So it's funny because, as it turns out, with people going to different jobs and changes and stuff, there's just a few of us originals standing. But we welcome the partners, and some people are still with us. They're just in other jobs now, and so everybody's still contributing. So that's really wonderful. I was really tickled by Mr. Newton's presentation, and it reminded me of a story. When I was in the 1979, I went to the University of Kansas to get a job or to take a job in residence life. And while I was there, I worked on my doctorate and was fortunate to finish there. Rock Chalk Jayhawk, go KU. Even though they lost, I was actually at the Magic game on Friday night, so I was watching the KU game on my phone. And then when we came out, it was in they were ahead the whole friggin' time. So, how sick is this? My husband and I are outside the arena after the game. Magic did win. Yay, go Magic. My first time in the arena. Oh, my God, what a place is that? If you haven't been, go just to see it. It's unbelievable. Anyway, so we were standing with our phone. My phone had died, so now we're on his phone, watching, so saw the last three-point bucket that the Michigan hit, and we're like, oh, my God, and then we decided to go to our car because we knew it was going into overtime. So by the time we got to our car, we got the phone on again and saw the last ditch attempt for KU to hit it and win by 1 point, and they missed. So that was terrible. But before I was telling you that story, I was telling you another story. And that was that, and this goes back to Mr. Newton. When I was at the University of Kansas working on my doctorate, one of my best friends, my friend Jane, and her husband Herb, who was an engineer, they bought their first home around the same time that my husband and I bought our first home. And so, we were best friends and saw each other all the time. So there was always lots of stories about, home repair and did you know this and did you know the other thing. And so Jane, Herb loved telling this story because, as I mentioned, he was an engineer. So he said, you wouldn't believe what Jane said. So they got, a little carton of liquid nails. And so Jane said to Herb, well, how long do we have to wait before they hardened? See, Jane was ahead of it. She was thinking there's a way to turn this liquid substance into an actual nail that you could hammer on and everything. So I've got to call her and tell her. She was way ahead. So anyway, so the last year, if any of you how many were here last year? I know we did the thing. So okay, so maybe about a third of the room was here last year. So last year we were in this very room, and what we did was we were very interested in the student perspective. So we invited students. We had two panels. We had first panel was a group of students who, from all of our various colleges, had made the decision to come to the Florida colleges because of DirectConnect. And so we were interested in finding out, well, how did you make that decision, and when did you make that decision, and what influenced you? And we did a little interview, and that was very interesting. And then in the afternoon, we had invited students who had graduated from the Florida colleges and had actually transferred to UCF through DirectConnect. And so we were interested in, well, what was your experience, and what would like to have known that you didn't know, and stuff like that. So it was all great. And honestly, I don't think anybody will believe, Pam Kavanaugh and I principally orchestrated, and other partners helped. But people said to us, well, you got the successful students there, but we want to hear from the unsuccessful students. But honestly, we didn't try to get just the successful students. I mean, that's who happened, maybe those students who came to mind or anything. But the feedback anyway, after we had processed that as a team today, a group like today, was, well, we really want to know more, not just from a few students. So we embarked on conducting focus groups. And so we worked on this actually quite a bit last spring, and we invited in a professional marketer, market research firm, Falk Research, and Thor Falk is the principal investigator there. And so we worked with Thor. And so that's what I have to share with you today, is what we learned from these groups. So the first thing we did was we we looked at 4 different groups, and they were all Valencia students, but 2 of the groups were students who were still at Valencia in these various configurations of credit progression, and then 2 were Valencia graduates who had already gone on to UCF, 1 who were in their first term, and the second that had been there at least 2 terms, and in some cases more. And we looked at a balance of the gender and the ethnicity and then we played with majors a little bit. We tried to get half and half in terms of the STEM and the non-STEM. And so the discussion guide that we developed with Thor was along these lines. So there was a multitude of questions. Each group was about 2 hours long, had about 8 to 10 students in it. And we did this in an evening in November. So we sat there from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. 2 nights in a row to hear. And Thor was conducting it. And they were also videotaped. And so we have those if anyone wants to look at them. But these were the categories in which there was a set of questions that Thor brought them through. So first, in terms of their decision to attend the college, and again, using Valencia as the generic college here, the DirectConnect to UCF was definitely mentioned, but not just as a reason, but also as a benefit. So for anybody in the room who was with us in the early days, like Joyce said when she started, we first called it the Central Florida Higher Education Consortium. You know, it was hard to get that on a poster, so that's why we came up with DirectConnect. So there is great understanding and recognition of the brand DirectConnect in our community. And that was not the case in 2005, 2006 when we started. So, I mean, that is something right there, something that we really achieved. And Angie has the scars to show how that came about. She paid for that, but we got there. But the students they were also interested in obtaining a quality education, lower price, of course. Many of them mentioned they didn't feel like they were ready for the bigness of UCF and what they imagined what it took to be successful there in terms of rigor. Some of them, frankly, had tried to start at UCF and didn't get accepted, because of the admissions requirements as freshmen. And then, of course, location and cost, which I think any of the colleges in the room, anytime we've ever done research on why did you go to the community college, it's nearly always location and cost, So that definitely popped out in here as well. And then on choosing a major, I kind of laughed when I saw this list because those of us who have been working in career and educational advising for years, I mean, this is pretty much, the 5 reasons that people say, So some students knew all along that they really knew what they wanted to be. Some of them had decided in high school. Some of them bounced around from major to major and had landed at something that they were now interested in. Other people, they knew somebody, like my dad was an engineer or something like that, or they had some kind of role model. And others were oriented towards the economic ability of the job opportunities and that kind of thing. So that wasn't for me anyway, wasn't anything that surprised me. Their decision to attend UCF, because again, the students who are with us in the colleges could go to any number of the state universities in addition to private schools in Florida and outside of Florida and elsewhere. So, but for many students, they pretty much all said the decision to attend UCF actually preceded the decision to attend Valencia. So again, this idea of pathway was very strong. They very clearly understood and had made decisions based on the fact that they were coming to Valencia as a bridge to get to the university. And that was very clear. And again, some of them didn't get accepted. Others wanted the smaller setting. Some of them missed the enrollment deadlines. That's a surprise. And then some actually had started at UCF and found it too challenging and either had, and they were kind of vague about that, but I imagine some of them just were told by UCF that they couldn't continue there and then ended up coming back to Valencia. And we have a whole new program for them, right? We have a whole program that works with those students. So that was around their decision. So then their knowledge and their perception of DirectConnect. What did they know about it? What was their impression? How did they find out? Generally, they talked about it being very well advertised and promoted on the Valencia campuses, and these were all of the different ways. And one of the things that's interesting is all of us, we have these multiple systems. We have these multiple ways that we communicate with the students. So it's kind of, in some ways, to me, kind of affirming to say, okay, they're using all of them. In other words, it's not just one thing or the other thing that's really making the difference. It's the whole system and the whole gestalt of it that's really getting their attention. And so they are, again, recognizing that. I would say here that the students who are currently at Valencia were a little bit more facile with these. Like, they were able to roll these off a little bit more. The ones who were at UCF, and there you got two things going on. They were at Valencia, say, 1 or 2 years ago, so there's a time factor there, but also in terms of time, like top of mind, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The students who were at Valencia were able to mention these more top of mind than the students who had left us and gone on to UCF. And then there's sources of DirectConnect information, like how does it really work, and how do you know where to go to really find out what you need to do to use DirectConnect to the fullest. And so again, the students who are at Valencia assigned greater value to these resources, and again, they were using, for those of you who don't, at Valencia, our answer center is kind of our front door where we have cross-trained staff. So that's like the first place most students start. But again, they were using the people in the programs and the offices that we have. On this campus, we have the UCF building, which is known as the University Partnership Building, right next, or right kind of behind us, and so it's very visible. We also have space like that on our Osceola campus, but it's part of a larger building, so it's not labeled although we did hear that, right, Kathleen? We heard the student thought the whole 150,000 square foot building at Osceola was UCF's building. So it just opened in January, so I think we're working on new signs on that, so don't want there to be any confusion about that. So right. And then what was Valencia's role in helping them to navigate through DirectConnect? And again, the students who were still at Valencia were definitely more positive than those who had transferred. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit more about what this transfer student said. But they did note that the resources were there for them, but that you had to take personal responsibility to use them, and that you had to use them, you had to connect with them, you need to figure it out. There was a sense of, that it took initiative on the part of the student to do that. The students who were able to take charge of their academic path were able to find the resources. And then some of them who said, well, I really didn't pay attention, so I struggled, it wasn't real clear to me, I had to find out, or I made this mistake or that mistake, I maybe didn't take the right courses. And again, that was definitely pronounced among those who had already transferred. So what surprised me, getting back to Sandra's data on the bubble chart, which I know we all just want to delve into that, but how many of those bubbles that were high, the big bubbles that were high numbers and high percentages were orange. That means they're 2,000 level courses. Like, why are they taking 2,000 level courses at UCF? And I think that's the big elephant in the room that we all have to sort out and figure out what's going on with that. And then once they did transfer to UCF, most of the students, all the transfers who, again, were somewhat critical. So this wasn't a group that was singing la la like everything's wonderful. They were actually critical of what they understood about DirectConnect before they got there. But once they got there, they said that the process was easy, and they were actually particularly very, very positive about the UCF orientation process. So shout out to Charlene Stinnard, and Chanda Torres is in the room, and all of you. I know there's a huge team that works on this at UCF, but they felt in all of these ways. They mentioned these top of mind, the things that they experienced that they really appreciated. Matter of fact, they wanted Valencia's website to look like UCF's website. This is how dumb I am. It looks the same to me. I don't understand what the difference is. I totally don't get it. So I'm like older than dirt. I just don't get it. So anyway, so some more on the transfer experience. Again, I mentioned this. They found they didn't have the course prerequisites. They did notice a difference with the larger lecture courses, and also they mentioned here the the extent to which online learning is embedded. The lecture capture is one technology that they weren't familiar with. They mentioned that as a struggle. They mentioned that there was academic support, particularly the teaching assistants in the smaller groups. They really liked that. They found the university rigor a shock. And there was kind of a real mixed bag across all 4 groups about social life. Definitely noticing the difference, of course, in a university environment, social life than what we have at the colleges, but mixed bag as to whether they cared about that or not, both at the college and at the university. Some who said, yeah, I would have loved to have gotten involved in university life while I was at the college, and others who said, I'm at the university and I really don't care. I go to school, I go to work, I go home, that kind of thing. So that mixed bag thing that I think we've all seen before. So the first 2 groups, the last question, the methodology that Thor uses is that when he reaches the end of the guidelines, he comes back, he gives them an assignment, a writing assignment, and the assignment here was, what are your fears or what are your concerns about transferring to UCF? And that was to the first 2 groups. And then he comes back to those of us who are watching and says, is there anything else you want me to follow up on? Any other questions that you want me to ask? And those kinds of things. So that's who he checks in with us as the designers or the co-designers of the study. So the fears were that this idea that I'm going to miss that one detail, that isn't that the world we all live in, the gotcha kind of, like the big sign at Penny's that says, $2.99, and then you get up and it says or higher, that kind of, we're all we live in that world where there's that gotcha kind of experience, and you're wondering, I didn't read the small print or whatever. So they're experiencing us that way, and what a shame. I know Dr. Shugart would really hate to hear that, because he very much cares about this postmodern generation and what they've learned about the way we just try to deceive them. But being able to cope with a bigger campus, they're worried about that. They're worried about difference in teaching styles. That's kind of just a general, like, what are university faculty like? What do they expect? A lot of questions like that. They are worried then about how that's going to affect their grades and if they're going to get the courses they need to graduate on time. So these students were very concerned about that. Then the students who were already at UCF, the question he asked was, what would you suggest that Valencia do to better prepare you for transfer? And so this was the suggestions that we got: more rigorous preparation, more specific advising on requirements and guidance. The computer and the online learning experience, again, they felt a little ill-prepared for that. They would love to interact with UCF students that are in their major, and then, like I said, some of them were interested in a social connection to UCF while they were at Valencia. So it was very interesting study, and I think that you can see that it blends into the great benefit of qualitative research in combination with quantitative research is how you get the picture when you blend the two. And of course, we can continue to do this kind of research as we formulate more questions and all. So, are there any questions about it? Okay. All right, covered. Told you everything you wanted to know. That's great. So, okay.